Hello again, and thanks for staying with us. So President Cyril Ramaphosa has extended the 350 Rand Social Relief of Distress grant till March next year. More than 10 million people have benefited, we're told, from this grant since it was introduced. However, those who want to challenge the outcome of their applications can do so, we're told, through Sassa's appeals process. But does the agency actually have the capacity to carry this task out for yet another year? Well, for some answers and perspective, let's bring in Sassa's spokesperson, Paseka, Letsatsi, who's with us now via our video link. It's great to see you on this Monday morning, sir. Thanks very much indeed for making time. I mean, perhaps let me begin by just asking you to paint a picture for us about how the run in the disbursement of this grant has been so far before we speak about the year ahead.
Good morning, Ayanda. Thanks for having us. I think so far we can safely say things have been going according to the plan. You're quite right. We have basically paying about 10.5 million beneficiaries. There's about 3 million of them which were rejected, but they have the opportunity to make an appeal. And we think because there's an extension with a year, would then be able to make things very seamless to make sure that things go properly. But however, we need to make mention of the fact that the processes are such that once the president makes an announcement, the Minister of Social Development therefore makes the regulation in terms of the extension and how to regularize to make sure that we disperse the 350. So we think the minister will definitely do that by the end of March.
I mean, I'm sure there's room for improvement still, though, and I can only speak anecdotally, but I often see, especially at the beginning of the month, still snaking queues outside post offices where people, I think, are left sometimes in the sun for hours before they're able to receive their money. Surely there's a better way of being able to run this?
No, you're quite right, and I think we have made an appeal to grant recipients or the applicants that one, they must give us their bank accounts if they have, because when we make the verification process, we picked up some of the beneficiaries have the banking details, but they choose not to give us their banking details. Secondly, we have made an appeal, and we still want to make it now, that beneficiaries must not go to the post office and make an inquiry if they have the 350 being deposited in the account, because that contributes to nothing but the snakes which you see at the post office. So we once again want to make an appeal that please wait for an SMS to confirm that the 350 has been deposited in your account, because if your neighbor alerts you or tell you that they got the 350, people have sometimes want to accompany their neighbors to the post office to go and make an inquiry. So we are just making that particular appeal to people that please wait until you get an SMS so that we keep the spread of COVID-19, but secondly, we avoid the long queues at the post office.
Yeah, we've heard that several times, and we know, Paseka, Letsatsi, that people typically don't necessarily respond to that quite well. I mean, I remember government in the past, in an unrelated issue, saying that people should wait until they get SMSs to get the vaccine. That doesn't mean that people didn't flock to the vaccination sites ahead of time. It begs the question about how we could try to do things differently, given the experience that now Sassa has and what you're seeing actually take place on the ground. I mean, is there room, for instance, to at least diversify the number of institutions that are able to administer this outside of just the post office? Perhaps banks coming on board, some grocery stores being able to assist, because we know that's where the people actually are.
No, definitely, you're quite right. We try to make sure that there are as many channels as possible, but in some instances, we still have to work on sorting out the contract. And now that there's an extension, we think we'll have time to interact with the merchants, to interact with the banks, so that we don't necessarily have only few institutions where people can then be able to access the 350. And we think we can only do better, and once we meet all the stakeholders. And I think when we try to help each other, Sassa and other stakeholders will then be able to make sure that we deal with issues of queue. You're quite right that sometimes, even if we try and advise people that they must not go to the post office and make an inquiry, they still flock to the post office. We need to make sure that we upscale our beneficiary education Because of COVID, in some instances, we could only use the media to interact with our people. But because now there are relaxation in terms of the protocol, we intend to make sure that we go to the communities and interact, but obviously respect the number which is not above 2,000, so that we're able to interact with people. Because sometimes I end up interacting with people on TV or radio might be difficult as compared to having to go and make sure that there's an interactive arrangement where we're able to answer questions to people and so on. We'll try and explore whatever method available to make sure that we reach out to our people.
All right, saying all the right things, but I'm going to push you for timelines if I can. I mean, again, I can't imagine a situation where, you know, the people who I've seen, for instance, have to endure standing in long queues in the sun for another 12 months. So when do you expect any kind of outcome from the engagements you're going to have with these stakeholders?
In actual fact, thanks for that question. I was just in a conversation earlier on with the authorities, and I think one of the things that we agree is that we need to make sure that we hit the ground running. We need to make sure that we come with a program so that we're able to do this thing by the beginning of next week. Even if we do not start at the big bang, but at least there must be a movement to make sure that there is that particular interaction.
Okay, beginning of next week, you say. That's when the ball is going to start running.
Definitely.
Okay, we'll hold you to it. In the past, we've also heard of double payments being made. This was at the beginning stages of this relief being rolled out. The minister came onto this platform and said they're trying to get back the money. I wonder how much of it you've been able to get back. But I wonder also if you've been able to prevent any further kind of irregularities from taking place.
I think what we need to explain is that you would find that in some instances the person applied in March, approved, and there was no payment. But when the payment starts, we need to make sure that by the time they approved, we backdate it because we don't want to shortchange people. However, in instances where there were some system glitch, we'll then be able to make sure that it gets sorted out. I can assure you, Ayanda, that in the second cycle, because the first cycle we did experience some minor problems, glitches, because that was the first time the process of the 350 was run out. But in the second process, I think we try to make sure that we close as many loopholes as possible. Because we know that in some instances, people try to be creative, defraud the system and so on. But in this era, I can safely say we tried everything to make sure that, one, people get what is due to them, but secondly, we do not necessarily frustrate people, or the system does not frustrate people when they are supposed to be approved, or when they've appealed, or when they must get their money.
All right, Paseka Letsatsi, thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. Please answer our call next week when we call you to get an update on your undertaking to engage those stakeholders. But for now, really appreciate your time on the AM Report. Paseka Letsatsi is the spokesperson for Sassa.